Everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar on QuerySurge AI. My name is Bill Hayduck. I'm the CEO of RTTS, QuerySurge's parent company. I have with me Mike Calabrese and Chris Thompson. They're two of our senior solutions engineers, and they're experts in data validation ETL testing. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into your chat window. We'll answer as many questions as we can after the presentation. We do not have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. So if it goes over and you want to stick around, we'll keep answering questions. Also, please use chat to alert us if you have any issues or any problems during the session. Thanks again for your time and participation. And now we're ready to start. So here we go. All right, that's my little intro on artificial intelligence. What I do want to say is that artificial intelligence has been all over the news, whether it's print media, social media, TV, everywhere. Even my wife knows about it. So it's really prevalent now. And last week, QuerySurge launched a generative AI solution. That's what we're here to talk about. We had a press release, and it's some amazing stuff you're going to see. So I'm going to start out with some quotes. I do want to say that now we live in a data and analytics economy, and that's where everything is. Data is like the new oil. Gartner says poor data quality now costs organizations an average of $14 million annually. IDC says that 79% of companies have more than 100 data sources, with 30% using more than 1,000. That's a lot of data sources. And also, Oren Ezioni, he's the founding CEO of the Allen Institute for AI, said AI is a tool. The choice about how it gets deployed is ours. A little bit about QuerySurge, if you don't know anything about us. We're a smart data testing solution. We test data warehouses, BI, and big data. One of the things we're aware of is that C-level executives and mid-level managers are using BI and analytics to make critical business decisions, and underneath all that is data coming in from everywhere. So there's source data coming in through ETL to data warehouses to data mart up to the BI and analytics reports. There it is coming in from big data lakes, from data warehouses to a migration, through enterprise apps like trading systems and pharma applications and ERPs like SAP, and there's a lot of typical data area issues. And QuerySurge has been really good about solving this for a long time. And the way it typically works is QuerySurge can connect to any 2 points at any one time. So it connects to your source data, whether it be databases, data warehouses, any kind of flat file or Excel, JSON files, web services, mainframes, anything that stores data. We connect to over 200 data stores. And the target data is typically a data warehouse, but it can be a big data lake like Hadoop and NoSQL, or business intelligence reports. QuerySurge connects to both, pulls the information in, compares every data set to find anomalies on the source and on the target, and then provides data validation analytics. So the test design strategy for a typical ETL testing solution is doing table-to-table and column compares, and that's usually for migrations or where there's no transformations. So the skill level to do something like that, QuerySurge has a wizard. It's real basic. You can do it visually. Design effort's minimal. It's incredibly fast. On RoCal compare, same thing. You use the wizard. Real basic stuff. Minimal design effort, incredibly fast. Business rules intermediate, depending on what you're trying to check. You create it with SQL. It's pretty much moderate SQL, and it's medium to fast as far as the design effort. But then comes the sticking point. Every ETL testing solution has the same issue, which is when there's transformations, whether you're splitting name and address, name a first name, last name, they're one column into 2 columns, or you're dividing them, or you're aggregating totals, or you're changing the type, then transformations are occurring. And that requires intermediate to advanced SQL skills. And it's moderate to difficult and very time consuming. And here's the sticking point. And here's the holy grail that we've been trying to solve for 10 years. And we've solved it. So we just launched last week QuerySurge AI. It's powered by artificial intelligence, and it's built around data mappings. And if you're not familiar with data mappings, I'm quickly going to go over them. A data mapping is typically the process of matching fields from one database to another, in our case, from source to target data stores. Mapping documents, also known as a source to target map, it's the most critical element required to plan data movement. It defines your ETL process. It's very similar to a requirements document in a software development project. In software development, you're defining your requirements, your business rules. In a data and mapping document, you're defining your data movement and your data rules. The mapping document captures business rules, data flow mappings, data movement requirements. It also specifies source input definition, target output details, business and data transformation rules, and absolute and optional data quality requirements. So here's a typical data movement process without an automated solution like QuerySurge. And we see this in a lot of data warehousing. So typically a data analyst will determine the requirements and create and maintain a mapping document. Then the data architect will review that mapping document, model and build target data warehouse, and then maintain the target data warehouse. The ETL developer will also review that mapping document, build the data movement logic from source to target, and they'll either be extracting and loading data or extracting, transforming, and loading data into the new data warehouse. And then the ETL tester will also review the mapping doc, create 2 tests for each mapping with a SQL editor, one for the source and one for the target. They'll execute the test, they'll dump the results of the test to 2 Excel files, and then compare the Excel files by eye. This is what most customers are doing when they come to us. And that's one of the problems that QuerySurge solved a long time ago. Imagine using a SQL editor like Toad or Squirrel, extracting data from your source database and from your target data warehouse, dumping them into 2 Excel files. You have 2 monitors, monitor on the left, monitor on the right. One test has 100 million rows and 200 columns. So now the tester's going to scroll down and to the right, looking for data anomalies. Highly inefficient. So what we did is we did a poll of experts. We know that data mappings are out there in the field. We know our customers are using them. We just didn't know how prevalent they were. So we conducted a survey on LinkedIn of data analysts, data architects, ETL developers, and about 380 responded to our 2 questions. And the first question was a compound question where we asked them, does your team use a formal mapping doc? And if yes, where do you store it? What form? So the consensus was that 81% of the teams use formal mapping documents. And 78% of those that responded that they used a formal mapping document stored it in Excel. So we knew we were going to target mapping documents with the solution, and it was going to be in Excel. The second question is approximately how many mappings are in your typical data warehouse project? Now, LinkedIn doesn't give us a lot of options, so we can only give them 2 choices. So, the consensus was 68% had more than 250 mappings, and 14% had between 100 and 250 mappings. So 82% or 4 out of 5 have at least 100. 2/3 of them, or 68%, have more than 250. How many more than 250? Our LinkedIn survey couldn't tell us. So when you're integrating with QuerySurge AI, and again, this is without an automated ETL testing solution, the process is skilled resources create the 2 SQL tests for each mapping, one at source and one at target, execute the tests, dump them to Excel, and compare them by eye, and create manual reports. So now you have a time sinkhole on the front where you're creating the mappings, because a lot of them are going to be around transformations. It's going to be difficult. And on the right-hand side, at the end of the process, you're going to compare the Excel files by eye, looking for data anomalies, and then you're going to create manual reports. Very, very time-consuming and not efficient. So when you use a tool, an ETL testing tool, whether it's QuerySurge or anybody else, you'll still be using 2 skilled resources up front to create SQL tests for each mapping, and some vendors like ourselves will provide wizards so you can do table to table and row to row compare and row counts if there's no transformations. If there is transformations, you're still writing the SQL. So then you execute the test, and then the testing solution compares results faster and provides reports. So QuerySurge solved the problem on the right a long time ago, and the problem on the left we've been thinking about for all these years. And now we've solved it. So now with QuerySurge and QuerySurge AI, any resource can convert all mappings in minutes. So whether they be a business analyst or a junior tester or anyone, as long as they have the mappings, QuerySurge AI will convert those mappings to tests automatically. Write the SQL for you, inject it into QuerySurge, and now you can run your tests. Compares will be done 1,000 times faster than doing it by eye. You'll get 100% coverage, and we'll provide you with data intelligence reports. This is a massive step up in automation. So we looked at our polling also on of our prospects and customers, and a survey of 530 of them said that 20% have at least 1,000 mappings. So this kind of completes the Lincoln survey, takes it another step, and 10% have at least 5,000 mappings. So let's look at the metrics around this. A data mapping of average complexity, if you're doing it without QuerySurge AI, takes about an hour of time to create the data tests. If they're simpler, they're shorter. If they're more complex, longer. But our numbers say about an hour of time. So if you have 1,000 mappings, which 20% of the people polled have, that's going to take you about 1,000 hours to create. So you're looking at one person, 25 weeks, or more people. You can obviously extrapolate. 1,000 hours times a typical consulting rate of $75 an hour, which is actually low compared to many consultants, is $75,000. QuerySurge AI can translate 200 mappings in an hour or 1,000 mappings in 5 hours. Using that same metric of $75 an hour, now you're looking at $375. That's a huge difference in time savings and cost. And if you happen to be one of those 10 that have 5,000 mappings, just multiply this by 5. You have $375,000 to pay for somebody to create the tests versus $1,850 for QuerySurge to do it through QuerySurge AI. Huge, huge time savings. So to integrate QuerySurge AI, we have two use cases. One's the initial mapping upload, where you take your mapping document, you bulk upload hundreds or thousands of mappings at once. Then as you get new mappings in periodically, you can incrementally load them one or more mappings at a time. And it looks a little bit like this. The initial mapping document gets ingested into QuerySurge AI. QuerySurge AI creates the SQL through the AI model, injects it into QuerySurge, creates the folders. Now you're ready to just run the tests. That's it. And on incremental mapping, same thing. It'll be much shorter time. Does the same process. So from an ROI perspective, there's a dramatic savings in time. A reduced skill set requirement. You do not need to be a SQL expert to deal with the transformations anymore. Now, anyone can do it, as long as you have the mapping doc. We released last week, and we're offering private demos and proof of concepts to this dramatic new solution. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mike Calabrese, who's going to show you what QuerySurge AI actually looks like. Mike?
All right. Thank you very much, Bill, for setting the stage here. I'll go ahead and take over sharing now. All right, everyone, welcome today to our demo of QuerySurge AI. To start, I have myself logged into one of our demo QuerySurge instances. QuerySurge itself is a Web 2.0 based application, meaning that it can be installed on a bare metal server, on a VM, as it is in this demo, or within your own private cloud. Once installed, users can access the QuerySurge tool via their favorite web browser and be able to log in. And we are currently logged into one of the modules in QuerySurge, which is called the Design Library. And this is where the bulk of the test creation work takes place. So I'm in a QuerySurge AI project. I've created a QuerySurge AI folder to contain these QuerySurge query pairs. Right now it's empty, but hopefully that will change shortly as we go through and demo the QuerySurge AI tool. The QuerySurge AI tool, as you can see, is deployed on my local system here, meaning that anyone that is a user of QuerySurge can deploy this to their local machine. And so long as they have credential information and access to the QuerySurge server, they should be able to log in and launch the QuerySurge AI tool and go ahead and get started with ingesting those mapping documents and generating those query pairs. I'll just cover some basic settings that we have available in the tool. As I mentioned, we do have the URL to the host name of the QuerySurge server, as well as the credential information. We also ask that you specify the project ID. So QuerySurge does have the concept of projects where you can house certain assets amongst different projects within QuerySurge. So if you had certain connections or data sets that you only wanted a certain subset of group members on your team to be able to access, you can set up specific projects to be able to do that. And then as I showed before, we do have the QuerySurge AI folder, which is going to be the destination for our query pairs that we're going to generate here today. Right now, I'm going to go ahead now for the next step is to generate or load in the mapping document here. We do have one mapping example document here that's getting loaded in. What we should see shortly is once that's loaded in, we'll have the middle pane here be populated with the information that's contained within that mapping document. We're going to be loading in, as you see here now, certain information such as the mapping number, the query pair name, which is what we'll want to generate for the query pairs, as well as the source and target technology information. So I'm going to go ahead now, once our mapping document is loaded in, and click the Generate button. And now at the point that we click the Generate button, what we should see happen is that the QuerySurge AI tool is now going to reach out to the AI engine to start generating SQL based off of the mapping information that's contained within this document. So speaking of the document, I'll go ahead and pull up the document that we have just loaded in. And to start, we'll have some basic information such as your mapping ID. So this is a unique identifier for each of the mapping requirements that you'll have. The query pair name, as I mentioned, this will be the name of the query pair that gets generated within QuerySurge once we load this in. And then we have some source and target information that we're going to look to feed into the AI engine to generate the SQL necessary to be able to test that the ETL process or the data process between source and target is behaving as expected. Just a few examples to list out here, and I'll cover actually what we're format is that we're starting with our source technology on the source side. So we're specifying, in this case, a couple different ones, MySQL and Oracle. And we're also specifying the source connection. So this is an ID specific to QuerySurge. This will be the connection ID in QuerySurge that you have set up for your technologies that you're connecting to. This way, when you generate your query pair, it will automatically be populated with a connection that you're looking to test. So a really useful feature there. We'll also need to specify our source table that we're testing, our source column that's going to be the source side of the test, and whether or not we want to include a source key. So this will be a unique identifier that we can align data between our source and our target to verify that it's across the systems appropriately. And then we'll get to our source logic section where we're going to be utilizing, as you can see here, really plain text to be able to describe the transformations that are taking place between the source and the target. So in this first example, you can see we have a full name field. So one of our customers' first and last name is being contained in a single column on the source side. And as you can see on the target side, that's being split out into two separate columns, one to house the first name, another to house the last name. So the logic to be able to do that is to split the full name field by taking the first substring for the first name and the second substring for the second string here, and then splitting it on the delimiter of the space in there. So just by describing that in plain text, what we should see happen is that the AI engine is able to decipher that and give us back a specific SQL statement to be able to achieve the development of this query pair test. And I should also note that I know we specify, and I mentioned that we specify target technologies. That's important because certain dialects of SQL will have certain syntax depending upon the transformations that you're using. And this will allow the AI engine to determine that and provide you with the appropriate SQL for your query pair tests. You can do multiple tables, multiple joins coming together if that's a requirement for your particular test. So in this example that I've highlighted now, we are testing, I believe, some credit card information, and the information is dispersed amongst multiple tables in our source and target data stores. So you can see here we're naming different tables, and these two, or I would say these four logical statements on our source and our target side are really all trying to achieve the same thing. We're joining information across multiple tables, but as you can see, we're using different keywords to be able to do that. And well, what we've seen is that the AI engine does a really really good job of deciphering that and providing the SQL. So you can say something like connect or match or link, and or actually the word join. And what we've seen happen is that the joins themselves will come back in the proper SQL format, and we'll get the desired outcome as far as our test creation is concerned. You can do other things like case statements, as we see here, where we're applying certain transformations based on the input in our source as versus the output to our target. And there's also ability to do things like direct mapping. So if you have a more simpler or straightforward test where you're doing maybe a database migration, or you're upgrading from development to QA or QA to UAT or prod, for example, and there are little to no transformations, you can quickly and easily create a multitude of tests using a direct mapping document to be able to do those. Coming back now to our QuerySurge AI tool, we can see now that the AI has generated SQL for us. If we wanted to preview any of that SQL, we can go ahead and drill down into each of the different rows here to determine that, okay, the SQL looks good. I am ready to now import that. At that point, you can go ahead and click the import button. I should also mention you do have the ability to selectively choose which options to, which mappings, I should say, to import into the tool. I'm just going to import all of them for the sake of the demo here. And once we do get the import complete, I'll come back over now to our main QuerySurge module here. So we did see that the QuerySurge AI folder is empty. If I just do a quick refresh, we should see now that we have several different query pairs based on the mapping document now populated within our tool. As you can see, going back to the first example, QuerySurge is testing the source and the target, and we have SQL generated to go against the connections that we've specified in our mapping document to be able to test those. QuerySurge does have a design time run option, so if you wanted to test these as a sort of one-off or just to confirm that the tests are working, that's a really nice feature to be able to do that. But if you're ready to do some more formal testing, we have the concept of what we call test suites, where you can run any number of query pairs as part of a single scenario. So I'm going to drag in every query pair that we just generated with the QuerySurge AI tool and actually kick this test suite off right now. So as you can see, we're coming over now to our run dashboard module, and this is where we'll monitor any past and active tests that are executing within QuerySurge. So we can see actually the test is now kicking off and we're getting results back. So I know Bill did mention this in his slide deck as far as one of the things that requires the most effort, and I can sort of attest to this because I've worked on multiple data testing projects myself, is at the point you get the mapping documents, the ability or the need to then sort of discern what those mapping documents are trying to test and then understand and develop the SQL to execute those tests is really where the bulk of the effort takes place. And as you can see on this demo, we've gone from just a mapping document to being able to generate the SQL to importing the test to now executing and completing the test runs all in just a matter of minutes. So something that would have maybe taken me, let's say 14 hours to develop and test and execute, we've now just completed in just a few minutes. And as you can see here, QuerySurge, when you execute tests, will give you all of your source information, all of your target information, whether or not you've identified any failures. So we can see for this test here, we've not identified any failures. That means data on source and the target have matched. Everything looks good. That's a past test. We're confident that our data is valid. In other cases where we do identify data failures, in this example that you're seeing here, we're seeing a clear difference between the card number fields between our source and our target. So there's a clear possible defect here in the ETL process when moving data from the source to the target. And QuerySurge can help you quickly identify those, as you can see here. I do have one more example that I'll run through here just to sort of highlight the ability for the AI engine to sort of discern specific syntax. In our first example, we focused in on MySQL and Oracle data stores. That's sort of where we have the test data set up in this demo environment, but I will like to load in another mapping document here, our example 2, which should show a bit of the differences that you can experience with different technologies. So this is our second mapping document. You can see here the logic we're using is pretty much the same. We're just converting a single column to a date data type. But where we varied it is within the source and target technologies here. And the reason I did that was to sort of showcase how the AI engine may handle different technologies that you're going to be able to point this against, and what type of source and target logic or SQL statements you would get back. So we can see that we've now loaded in this secondary mapping document. I'm going to go ahead and click generate. And what we should see is, even though we have the same source and target logic pretty much, is we should see some variation in the SQL that's generated based off of the source and target technologies that we're feeding into the AI engine here. So as that continues to generate, we can, as I mentioned, the source and target technologies, as well as the connections, which are specific to QuerySurge, will all be populated for us once we go ahead and import those into our QuerySurge tool. The connections themselves are defined in QuerySurge's administration module, I should say. So, so long as you have the connections you're looking to test set up and configured within QuerySurge, these should automatically be populated when you're inputting and generating these query pairs into the tool itself. So coming back here now to seeing the SQL that's generated, we can see that there are specific differences when you're dealing with, let's say, Cassandra versus Oracle, or Databricks versus Snowflake. You can see there's a specific difference that we're going to be generating in our SQL syntax that's based on the syntax for the technology that you have selected here. And just going ahead to click import again, we should see those new query pairs be generated and loaded into QuerySurge. And as I mentioned, the connections, as you can see, based on the ID that we've provided, have now populated within the query pairs themselves. So very excited here at QuerySurge about the capabilities of this tool. I know myself, as I mentioned, from a data practitioner, this is going to be a tremendous time saver and a very useful tool for any future data testing projects, especially if you're just getting started out with QuerySurge or just starting a new project. This really does provide a tremendous help and a tremendous ability to be able to get those tests started just based off of these mapping documents and go from that mapping document phase to the execution phase in just a really short amount of time. So that does conclude the demo portion here. I'll pass it back to you, Bill.
Thanks, Mike.